very definition of a state is something that can secede.
Sure. Well, and then, I don't know about all, but the vast majority of the state conventions that ratified the Constitution said in their ratification that they reserved the right to secede at any time.
Well, I think only 3 of them actually said that, but the very fact that their ratifications were accepted as valid meant that, of course, a state has the right to secede, not just these 3. But if these 3 did, they all did, Virginia, Rhode Island, and New York. Odd to think of New York seceding, although what goes around comes around, as they say, and now the blue states are grumbling about secession a little bit.
And you think it's a good idea, just let them go?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, what about the red state voters in the blue states?
What about what?
What about the 49% of the people in the blue states who voted red?
Well, they just have to live with it, I guess.
Well, you know, I agree with you. I'm all for the Articles of Confederation, if not just complete market anarchy, because I see the Constitution of 1789 as a coup d'etat, which, you know, has led to, as we've been discussing, a permanent state of warfare pretty much ever since then. And I don't know, actually, I was a little bit hopeful reading today's column that you wrote, or maybe it was yesterday's, but your latest column where you say that don't worry about the American empire because we're going to go bankrupt before we go take over the whole world. And
yeah, I think that's very likely.
The dollar seems like it's having a lot of trouble right now, no?
Yeah, I don't understand these things very well, but my gosh, they've run up such a colossal debt that every American child is $100,000 or so in debt as soon as he comes out of the womb. So, going to tell him he has self-government and these debts have been imposed on him before he was even conceived? Ridiculous. But that's what we've come to.
If I may attempt, which this is not going to be, you know, very good because I don't believe this for a minute, but I'm trying to play devil's advocate here and justify the American empire by saying that, you know, they call the empire, they call it free markets and democracy. That's what they really want to do, is export the American and or British way of life to everybody else on Earth and force them to accept it. But they point out that there are now fewer dictatorships on Earth than ever before. And, of course, all praise due to the USA.
Yeah. Well, if you mean simple strongman dictatorships, yeah, they're disappearing. But we have other things, don't we? We have bureaucracies. Look, does any elected official come to your door to offer his services? No, if a government agent comes to your door, it's someone you've never heard of and certainly didn't elect. He's got a gun. If he's a cop, it's on his hip. If he's not a cop, it's back in the office. The government is so colossal, it just reaches into every pore of American life now, that it's ridiculous to call this self-government. It's just a matter, of who the figurehead is going to be for the next few years. It doesn't make much difference whether Bush or Kerry wins. No, they're pretty much the same. They agree on nearly everything. And this is what, Chesterton said, men can always be blind to a thing so long as it's big enough. And men now are blind to the total politicization of society. There's nothing outside the government scope.
Which is what makes us fight over all these things that really aren't worth fighting over.
Right.
I remember Jefferson wrote that he cares not whether his neighbor has one God or 1,000 gods, because it neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. And
well, I care, but I'm not going to try to unite the church and the state. The best solution to the church-state problem is to get rid of the state.
There you go. Same thing with the schools, right? You have people fighting whether to force prayer in school or whether to force secular humanist propaganda in school. Hey, let's just abolish government school, and then you can send your kid to whatever kind of propaganda machine you want.
Right, or none.
Or none.
Yeah, blasphemous thought. Because Americans believe in education, and it's one of the strange features of American life that we accept the principle of communism when it comes to schools. And if you send your kid to a private school, you still have to pay for the public schools too. You can send him to a Muslim school if you want, but you still have to pay for the atheist school, government school.
Right. Well, I think with the Bush re-election, there's really quite a few opportunities here for realignment. And that's what my community college history teacher called it, when everybody's opinion changed and the whole paradigm just completely fell apart. And I think this whole left-right thing is pretty much dead. And I think it's time for the American people to start seeing themselves in two major camps: those who worship the state and those who worship liberty and detest the state's infringement on that liberty. And I think if we can rearrange the left-right spectrum into an up-down spectrum and have liberty on one end and slavery on the other, I think a lot of the, like we're discussing, the social issues that divide us sort of become moot. Because as long as that other person's point of view isn't being legislated against you, what do you really care? Mm. And I've noticed, in fact, there's a case right now before the Supreme Court about medical marijuana and federalism, which is forcing left-wingers all across America to re-examine Article 1, Section 8 and think that, maybe federalism isn't such a bad idea after all.
Yeah.
Maybe if they want to keep pot illegal in Alabama, they can, but if we want to legalize it in California, we can.
It's funny how losing power tends to shake people's philosophies up a little, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, they used to assume that the mega state was on their side and always would be. Now they're finding there's a new book by a couple of British observers from The Economist arguing that Bush has indeed created a new kind of conservatism, a big government conservatism. And suddenly a lot of liberals are discovering the virtues of limited government. I wonder if they'll go all the way and discover anarchism. We can dream, can't we?
It would be nice, although the left version of anarchism, I don't know. I've known some left anarchists, and it sounds pretty much just like communism to me. It's not quite the Rothbardian Hoppian school.
No, not at all.
But it's better than being a communist. I mean, outright, workers of the world create a dictatorship and that kind of Marxist stuff.
Right.
In fact, I'll tell you, Joe, I had a conversation long ago with a left-wing anarchist. This was back when I was still a constitutionalist. And I was explaining to this guy that, listen, socialism with a police force is communism. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, fine, but capitalism with a police force is fascism. And I went, dope! You got me there, pal. Because actually, isn't that exactly the case? If you have capitalism, as long as you have a nation state as well, the people who are already rich are going to hire that nation state to protect them from everybody else.
Well, I don't know. The word fascist is used so loosely without much definition.
I use it pretty much interchangeably with mercantilism, where the state and the private interests don't abolish each other, they work together.
Well, yeah, that can happen, but there are other things, too. I mean, for example, we now keep hearing this word Islamofascism to refer to the enemy in the war on terrorism, but these Islamists aren't particularly statist. The idea that they want a sort of business-government collusion is pretty unrealistic.
Right, yeah, I think that's a pretty ridiculous
thing. What their final goal would be. I don't even know if they have one. They just right now want to drive the U.S. out of their part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if they were tremendously successful at that and could somehow impossibly consolidate all power in the region, they might try to export their theocratic ways outside of the region, but I can't imagine that would be something they'd be able to do anytime soon. I don't know if you'd call yourself a paleo-libertarian or paleo-conservative or somewhere in there in the liberty-loving old right.
Theo-anarchist.
Oh, neo-anarchist. There you go.
Theo.
Oh, what?
Theo-anarchist.
Oh, theo-anarchist.
Right. I believe that if we get rid of the state, society will reorganize around the churches, which is as it should be. They'll exert moral authority, and they'll have no enforcement powers except ostracism, which is also as it should be.
Yeah, prefer mores to legislation. Is that right?
Right. Values galore.
Well, I sure appreciate that, and I'm glad that people get a chance to know that you don't have to be a communist to be against this war, or the next one, for that matter.
No. Marx rooted for the North in the Civil War.
Of course
it was more progressive than the South. The South was feudal and the North was capitalist, and that was the next stage of development on the way to socialism and communism. He was a newspaper correspondent in New York during the war.
Let's see. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you about. I thought this was funny. I was Googling your name to prepare for the show, and I found that there's a lot of racists out there who really don't like you because you're so politically correct.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. I hate to disappoint them, but, if you want to be a racist, then first thing you should notice is the white race seems to be destroying itself. Look at the population numbers.
Yeah, well, and destroying everybody else, too.
Yeah, well, we'll get them all. I mean, this is, I can't see getting so indignant about the immigrants, for example. They're just behaving naturally. They're having kids and trying to improve their lot. Why don't we do that?
Because we're too busy trying to run everybody else's, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. So, the West is not even reproducing, not even maintaining, what's the phrase I'm groping? Replacement, not even achieving replacement levels. Whose fault is that?
Well, I think what tends to happen is when societies become rich and prosperous, people tend to only have one or two children and invest a lot in the raising of those one or two children instead of having 10 and hoping they get lucky.
Yeah, well, that's just unhealthy. I mean, it's morbid. What would you rather have, a child or a new car? Gosh, I don't know which of my kids I would have traded for a new car. I've got 4. And if I'd gotten a new car instead of one of them, that car would have been on the junk heap many years ago. I wouldn't have the kid. I like the kid.